What is your name?
James Timothy Connors, C-O-N-N-O-R-S.
And where were you born?
G-E-R-E, Jerry, West Virginia.
How old were you during World War II?
Well, when it began, I was 14. And, of course, I lived through it. I had two brothers was in the service, and I wasn't old enough, and when I did get old enough, they wouldn't draft me because of both my brothers being in service and my mother a widow. So someone had to stay home and feed her. That was my job. But I wanted to go bad enough during the war, but I was gung-ho like all the youngsters, you know. But I didn't get to go. I enlisted in between all this that my mother didn't know about, or my boss didn't know about, or anybody but myself. I just enlisted in Morgantown, got on a troop train, and went to Charleston. And my mother, of course, she missed me. I don't know why. And my boss missed me, and he happened to be on the draft board. So he pulled some strings and had the phones ringing, and they sent me back from Charleston. They wouldn't let me go any farther than that. I was needed more at home, they said. So they shipped me back to Morgantown.
How did the war impact your life?
Oh, I suppose about like everybody else's. Everything was scarce and rationed, and you never knew when you was going to get a gallon of gas or a tire for your car. And gas was cheap enough. Quarter a gallon on Saturdays, 5 gallons for $1. But you didn't have the dollar. That was the only problem. Yeah. And of course, the food was the big thing. You just, even if you had the money, you couldn't buy the food because it was all rationed. And I suppose some of the folks might have had a connection where they could get it. I heard about black marketers, the farmers butchering the beef and putting it in their wagons. In fact, this one farmer told me himself, and I'm sure it was a true story, but he would take it to the markets after dark, butchered, covered up with hay in a wagon, and sell it to the merchants who would sell it for no telling what, you know, just whatever the public would bear. But those kind, they weren't too many of them, but there were a few. But we survived, and I was coming home one day and had a blowout on my car. My tire just blew clear off the rim. No spare. So I had to leave the car parked along the road and called the ration board, and they gave me a certificate to get a new tire, a new recap tire. So I rolled my wheel to the tire station that they suggested I go to, and they installed the tire, and I went back to my car parked along the road. Nobody bothered anything back then. Put the tire on, and before I got home, it blew out again. Of course, I began to look for tires like everybody else, and there wasn't any. But that was the big thing, the scarcity of things. And of course, your friends going to service and getting shot up and killed, and half of our neighbors were already shot. We were fortunate, though. My brothers both made it back. One was in the European theater and the other one in the Pacific theater. But they both made it back in good health. But as far as normalcy is concerned, we didn't know what normal was, really, because it was all such a turmoil. The depression, the war, the fighting, and the hunger, and all that stuff. We didn't have time to think about anything else. But it was still good. It was good for all of us. We learned a lot. We learned how to survive. And we're all survivors, these old-timers.
Was your family or your community very political at all? Like, did they feel very strongly for or against the president, the war?
No, that was never even thought of. We were at war, and we had it to fight, just like the old colonists were. It was a job to do, that's all. You never heard no conscientious objectors and nobody complaining. And Of course, the mothers were all worried about their sons, but their sons was no better than anybody else, so I had to protect the country. And they had no idea what we were fighting about. Just there was a war on. We had it to win. And the boys did it. Did a good job. Just took a while.